Nerderotic.com.
Welcome back to Nerdrotic. My name is Gary Beekler, and I come to you from Nerdrotic.com, and it's about time I talk about the Orville. Sorry, this one's like 4 days late, but Captain Marvel has taken over the channel. Now it's time to play catch-up, and I really wanted to talk about something fun, even though I don't know how fun of an episode this was. It was a good episode, but I don't know how fun it was. It dealt with some pretty dark themes for this somewhat comedic show, and you see it evolving right before your eyes. After the excitement of Identity Part 2, I was fully expecting the show to kind of dial it back, go to more comedic tones, do a relationshipy episode. We got a character-driven episode focused on Gordon, but it was definitely not fun, and it dealt with some dark themes that, well, let's just say the other science fiction show that's on right now tries to do and fails, and this one does and succeeds every single time. Every time the Orville airs, it really shows why it's our Star Trek. So we start out the episode with Yaphet getting a medal, and I love it's the little things, a medal that he actually earned. Unlike the other science fiction show at the end of season 1, after a certain character committed a mutiny and started a war and ended the war and got a medal for it, Yaphet actually showed bravery protecting Ty and getting injured, and I felt more for that blob of goo than I did for any other character in that other science fiction show. So after Yaphet gets his medal, Ed Mercer gets a call from Admiral Perry. He and Kelly find out that the Krill are willing to talk after the battle with the Kalon. They are willing to do the Lok Vi, which is a preliminary talk for peace talks, and they have to rendezvous with the ship, and it looks like Ed has to be the one to do the negotiations because he is the only one with any experience. They are to rendezvous with the Devaro Co., which is a ship that means the bringer of blood, near the Krill planet to pick up their ambassador. As they approach the ship, a shuttle escapes it, a Krill shuttle, and asks for assistance, and it turns out it's a Union officer. Of course, they let the ship crash land in the shuttle bay, and we find out that it is one of Gordon's old friends, Oren, and he is there with his daughter named Liana, and this automatically starts a diplomatic crisis. The Krill claim that Oren had blown up 3 Krill ships, so it looks like it might thwart the diplomatic talks between the Union and the Krill, but it does show that the Krill are serious, that they're not attacking right now, which they would have done in the past. We also find out that this is, of course, a very old friend of Gordon. He's known him since he was a child, since grade school, and the last time he had seen or heard from Oren, he was living at Outpost 73, where it got attacked by the Krill. In that attack, Oren's wife was killed. Liana refuses a medical scan from Dr. Finn, and it looks like she is mute due to her growing up in a Krill prison. Oren regains consciousness and kind of fills in the blanks. It says, yes, she was pretty much tortured. They weren't very kind to her, so she hasn't said anything in 12 years. And then we see Gordon seeing Oren for the first time. Ed has to break into the friendly reunion and tell them that we have a diplomatic crisis on our hands, and he needs to know right now, was he involved in blowing up the Krill ships? Oren, of course, denies this and denies even knowing that there was a ceasefire, but the problem remains. Seth MacFarlane had talked in Comic-Con last year about taking a more serious tone and lessening the comedic elements of this show, and they definitely did this episode. There was one small one that was pretty funny. Ed had Kayali stalling the Krill and asking them for mother's maiden name, asking for urine samples and possibly a stool sample, I'm not sure, while he tries to get to the bottom of the mystery because he is on the clock. Ed has stalled the Krill long enough, and they do eventually have a meeting. Ed tries to get them to table the whole Oren issue, and they say no. They give him 12 hours before the ship leaves, and that's how much time Ed has to either turn over Oren or figure out who actually did this. Ed did question how was it possible that just a small shuttle could destroy 3 Krill ships with no visible weapons, and they don't really care. They just think it is him. That's what an interrogation is for. We all know interrogation, though, means death. We get some background on Oren, Gordon, and Liana. We find out she is pretty good at that game Marcus and Ty were playing in Identity Part 1. We also find out that Oren saved Gordon's life. Now, what I'm confused about, was this the attack that got his wife killed? I wasn't really sure about that, but Gordon mentions that it would have been him in the Krill prison and not Oren if he hadn't stopped to save Gordon. We find out Oren was in the prison when his wife died, when he found out his wife died, and we find out that Gordon was in a hospital deciding whether or not to keep a mohawk. Gordon says he owes him one, and Orrin mentions that the peace with the Krill is probably a bad idea, surprising Gordon a little bit, and he mentions, hey, the peace might show that your wife didn't die in vain, which completely pisses off Orrin and ends the conversation in awkwardness. In the meantime, Ed checks in with Kalia in an off-the-record conversation asking what does she think about Orrin. She says she suspects something, but she can't put her finger on it. We also see Orrin walking around engineering, acting very suspicious. He is then caught by Kalia in a back room looking at stuff, but he doesn't really get caught doing anything, but we certainly suspect he is up to something. In the meantime, we also find out that Admiral Perry is considering a provisional extradition to the Krill just this once, because there is no formal extradition treaty with the Krill, obviously, in the interest of the peace talks. Ed has one more conversation with Gordon asking if he does know anything or if there's anything he should know about Orrin. Gordon says no, he's a solid guy, gets mad at Ed and asks Ed to do his job, and there's a great line, "I'll get back to you when I figure out what that is." Gordon immediately goes to Orrin and tells him that they are considering extraditing him to the Krill. Orrin then pulls his "I saved your life" card, "you owe me one and I need you to help me to steal a shuttle." Gordon says no, and then Orrin says, well, then I guess you're just going to have to turn me into your captain. The reason Orrin wants to steal this shuttle is to stop the peace. He thinks it's a real bad idea. And Gordon, again, is very surprised at this. He goes and talks to Kayala and tells her that Gordon asked him to steal a shuttle, and he says he will handle it and asks her not to tell the captain. Then he goes right back to Orrin's room and says, let's go. Say it ain't so, Gordon. He chooses his friend Orrin over the crew of the Orville. It can't be. On their way to the shuttle, they are confronted by Kayali. Kayali mentions, hey, I thought you were going to the captain. And Gordon apologizes and shoots her, and they get away in the shuttle. But it turns out it was all a ruse. We know that Kayali can take a shot. She took one from the Kalon, and she just took a stun blast, although she thought it was a little hard. And they have a tracking device on the shuttle, and the Orville is watching what happens. This is a big gamble, Kelly points out, and it certainly is. Now, there have been some scenes where they're kind of trying to get to know the daughter a little bit. She hasn't talked. She's playing with some games. Kayali goes to talk to Orrin's daughter, Leanna, one more time, and she notices some marks on her arm and calls Dr. Finn. This is when we find out that Leanna is not Orrin's daughter. She starts talking and pulls a knife on Kayali. She throws her across the room. Just as Dr. Finn shows up, we see some yellow blood coming out of her nose. Dr. Finn tells them to get out of the room immediately and put a force field around it. No time to talk. Kayala and Finn make it out of the room. Isaac puts a force field around it and sucks all the nitrogen out of the room. We find out that Leanna is an invol from Lakar B. They are a race of beings whose blood explodes if it hits a nitrogen-rich atmosphere. That's why the Union had a treaty with this species, having them stay away from any planets with a nitrogen-rich atmosphere. We find out Orrin has been using this blood to destroy the Krill ship to end the peace talks. Meanwhile, on the shuttle, Orrin shows Gordon the invol blood and tells him that his daughter did indeed die with his wife, that he later escaped the POW camp, met up with the invol, and they became terrorists ever since. Gordon pulls a gun on him, tells him he's going back to the Orville. Then Orrin sets the detonator. There is a confrontation. There's a fight, a great fight. Scott Grimes just shines in this episode and has a badass fight scene. He wins, ends up having to leave the ship because he destroys the console, begs Orrin to take the other suit and go with him, but Orrin is going to stay because it's either die or go back to a Krill prison. Gordon takes one more look at his friend before he jumps out of the ship, and the shuttle explodes. And there's a great scene where the shockwave hits Gordon and he's flying through space, and this is such an expanse scene, and it is so well done. Then the Orville arrives, puts out a tractor beam, sucks Gordon in. Gordon gets sucked into the ship, and it looks like the ceasefire will continue with the Krill, and there will be some sort of peace talks. Now, earlier in the episode, Gordon accused Ed of being jealous of his friendship between him and Orrin when Ed was interrogating him about Orrin. Ed, of course, thought it was ridiculous, but later on in the episode, he confesses that he might have been a little jealous because he's the one person he can lean on. He's the one person he can, I don't know, have his coat open and show off his V-neck shirts. These V-neck shirts that they're doing are terrible. They really need to get rid of those. I got a thing against V-neck shirts. And he tells Gordon how much he relies on him. Gordon, of course, tells him that he's his best friend till the end, unless, of course, a hot girl shows up. And that's where the episode ends. Overall, a really good episode. Of course, the themes were friendship, domestic terrorism, probably some old Cold War themes, like when the wall came down, like what are the KGB agents going to do and the CIA agents going to do. But it also gets into duty over friendship and those choices. And that's something we saw, well, quite a bit in Star Trek and pretty much every sci-fi show we've ever seen. And it's not one that gets tired when it's well done. No, the Orville has not done anything super original, but the reason this show works is because it's character driven. Like I've said before, we care about these characters. We care about Gordon, and that can really hide a lot of flaws in a TV show because every TV show is flawed. We can pick every TV show apart. Now, some are easier than others, but with this one, it's really hard to because it's just charming and you don't want to. But I do have to point out what happened to Leanna. Now, I fully expected her to explode in that room and she didn't. So is she prisoner? What's going to go on with that? Maybe we find out next episode because we got no resolution with that. But otherwise, another really good episode. I can't wait. It sucks that we got to wait an extra week, but that delays the end of the show because the season's almost over, and then we have to wait another year, and we have not gotten a season 3 announcement yet, so hurry up, Fox. So I got to keep this one short. Everybody, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you in a couple weeks with another Orville recap. In the meantime, I will be back with Star Trek Discovery Live this Thursday. May the small folks sing songs of your greatness.
Nerderotic.com. Please subscribe.